If you paid attention to what Lenin's body looks like, he is lying in a sarcophagus and his hands are in a very characteristic position. It's like this. Mauve fist, the other hidden. This is a Masonic symbol that says that it is not just a teraphim, it is a reception system. A modern person, he does not understand that when entering a mausoleum or passing by it, paying attention to the mausoleum, he leaves a part of himself there. To the Caucasus, they're under Elbrus. You remember, there is a hidden airfield there, about which our people were not very well aware, and the Germans, up to a certain point, were flying calmly right through the front line. And they built their drug source there. Certain forces imperceptibly, without signing any contracts, implemented this project only through mentality, through consciousness. In the same way now they are trying, so far successfully, to preserve the situation. In order to pump up this source energetically at a new stage, which has an invisible, but very powerful influence on the consciousness of humanity living in this country.
Который оказывает незримое, но очень мощное влияние на сознание человечества, живущего в этой стране.
Friends, I greet you all. Today, we will talk with Valery Uvarov about. Even, probably, we will reveal the secrets of an unusual design, an unusual structure. That is located in the very center of our homeland, in the city of Moscow, on Krasnaya Square. And this structure is called the Lenin Mausoleum. Why is he still here? Why is he there? How was it built? What was it built for? Valery will tell you in detail today and reveal all the secrets. Valery, I greet you. Hello, dear. Glad to see you. But in fact, of course, we need to warn people right away that we talk about this topic periodically. We consider it from different sides. Moreover, when I travel around Moscow, we often pass through, and then this topic has been discussed for a very long time. In fact, this topic has a serious background. But the truth about this building still told it was not. And here you are again, such a kind of provocateur. You pull out the topic. Different guesses, different versions, theories. Because many in our country were outraged. Why Lenin's buried, do not bury the body, and so on. Then let's talk about the very essence. Let's start from the beginning. For if the topic is considered from all sides, it will take a large volume and a lot of time. But in order to reveal the idea itself, for what it was done and why, it does not take much time. We need to start with the fact that the mausoleum and the very idea of its construction, why it was done, belongs to Shambhala. This is a Shambhala project. And we are talking about a very ancient technology. I am afraid that we will be immediately pelted with hats because many people do not know what Shambhala is, do not believe in Shambhala. They think that this is a mythical country. Where did it come from? In other words, you are now saying that the Bolsheviks were connected in some way with Shambhala. This is not quite the right understanding. Then how? This is a Shambhala project. This is not a project of the Bolsheviks in cooperation with Shambhala. This is a Shambhala project. Shambhala is that energy informational environment, which does not care what happens to our civilization on Earth. On the one hand, it's you and me, only on a different level of being. And this is the energy informational environment that bears enormous responsibility for the future of our civilization. for the future of the Earth, in short. And, of course, they are, by virtue of their capabilities, aware of the future that awaits our civilization in all its multivariance. And waiting for these events, wanting to participate in them, adjust in a certain way. So this decision was made. Of course, no one met directly with representatives of the then young Soviet state, the Politburo. The work itself began more than 100 years before that. Preparation of this situation. And the main idea is the future of the country, which are located here on our territory. Not the countries of the Soviets, but the countries of this people, which will have to play its most important decisive role in the fate of this civilization. So, they decided to apply a technology with the help of which it will be possible to create such an energy informational field environment that will, on the one hand, nourish, and on the other hand, stimulate movement in people, the unification of consciousness, in a strictly defined direction. That is why the first sample, if you allow me, then I will draw some nuances. The first test of how it will happen began just after the death of Alexander II. And when something like the cult of the personality of Alexander II began. Everywhere in Russia, very specific, very peculiar chapels have begun to be built. This is a pyramid, standing on 4 legs. There is a monument inside. It's not a coincidence. Alexander II himself, who knows, is an emperor who played a very important role in the fate of Russia, raising it to a much higher level. In other words, he has done a lot for Russia. And the creation of a kind of energy egregor, which, the cult of personality, made sense precisely in order to start creating a kind of community of people who think in the same categories. In principle, it turned out, and turned out well. And after that, it became clear that this technology could be applied by another person, on whom it was put. This task has been implemented. It is through Vladimir Ilyich Lenin. This is, after all, anyway, the founder of the Soviet state. And we are not arguing now about the ways in which what we call socialism, communism moved. We're talking about politics. It doesn't make any sense right now. The point is that we admit it. We don't admit it. We agree with Shambhu. We don't agree. We admit it. We don't recognize it. It doesn't matter. The future of our civilization is what we call communism. This is the future. Another thing is that when at one time there was an attempt, again the Symbolic project, to stimulate the good through the revolution, nothing happened. Then we decided to go. It was a parallel solution exactly this way. They are building a ziggurat in the center of Moscow. The idea itself, it appeared somewhere in the fall of the 23rd year. That is, as if they began to throw this idea. And our leadership, it was very different in its mentality. And we decided to submit the idea for consideration. Through Mikhail Ivanovich Kalinin. He is such a man from the people. And, what is very important, he was still an old believer of the White Sea Accord. It's not a coincidence. In other words, he was a person in whose mind it was possible to introduce the virus of this idea. And, unsurprisingly, Stalin immediately supported him. Although Stalin's political positions at that time in the leadership of the country, they were not strong. And the argument began. But everyone understood how it would develop, that it would not be a very simple solution. And it was at that moment that there were already 2 forces. One is for implementing what we are going to talk about now, and the other is in no way against it. The so-called fifth column. A struggle began, a very fierce struggle. And in fact, the fracture occurred at the moment when the fact that Stalin's body must be preserved. Lenin. In other words, I said, I'm sorry, Lenin's body must be preserved. And the idea itself, when the decision was made, very carefully, it was done through three people. It was Mikhail Ivanovich Kalinin, and Stalin and Grigory Zinoviev immediately supported him, because Zinoviev was higher in his status than Stalin. In general, a decision was made and work began. What is really wanted of Shambhala? And now look. We are watching with you the essence of the project itself. In the center of Moscow, immediately after Lenin's death, a primitive wooden ejaculate pokurat is being built. Lenin's body is placed there, and the pumping of Lenin's body with specific psi energy begins. If we just skip this stage until the 30th year and see what is really happening now, when, starting from the 30th year, this facility was actually built according to Shusev's project. And this ziggurat is nothing but an unfolded altar, built according to all the rules. This is a step pyramid. The material for the construction of the pyramid was brought from Iraq, from where you need to. And the structure itself is essentially an energy source. What's the point? People walking on the square, Red Square, and these events occurred regularly for any occasion. Passing by the Mausoleum, they seemed to look in the direction of the Mausoleum. And there you remember such a strange corner. This is a system for receiving information. If you paid attention to what Lenin's body looks like, he is lying in a sarcophagus, and his hands are in a very characteristic position. It's like this. In a fist, the other hidden. This is a Masonic symbol that says that it is not just a teraphim, it is a reception system. So, what's the point? We ask this question again. And now, after everything happened, as this temple was built, pumping began through the matrix of Vladimir Ilyich Lenin. Because the body that is embalmed there, it still contains the matrix of Vladimir Ilyich. After all, modification as a technology, it was not invented by earthlings. They told her, explain this technology, how to use it, in what case. And, in fact, now the following is happening. The energy that the teraphim's body received. The central part of this system. It was pumped and is being pumped to Vladimir Ilyich Lenin in other dimensions. This is one side of the question. We, the people living in our dimension now, we think in very short-term categories, very flat. We don't understand how the world works, and that our present life depends on what happens in parallel realities. It is a single whole. Shambhala understood this very well, which is why she launched this project. And within the framework of this project, pumping was going on and pumping is going on so that in some important reality of the earth, Vladimir Ilyich, he realized the idea of communism better than it was implemented here. But, are you talking about other dimensions now? Of course, which are invisible to our voice, but he exists there. And this is all a single whole. Yes, it's all
Это всё
working.
работает.
It's
Это
like
как бы
one side of the
одна сторона
question.
вопроса, но есть
But
другая
there is
сторона
another
вопроса.
side to the question. At
В
that
тот момент
moment, few, although to say that few
немногие,
did not
хотя,
understand
сказать,
that
что
another
немногие
global
не
war was
понимали,
coming,
что
a
грядет
world war, and it
очередная
came.
глобальная война мировая, и она пришла.
And
И
here,
здесь,
if you remember
если
and
ты
try to at least
вспомнишь
briefly assess the
и
situation, the
попробуешь
political situation,
хотя бы бегло
the human
оценить ту
situation that had been
ситуацию,
formed by that moment,
политическую
then
ситуацию,
the fate of our state hung
человеческую
in the
жизнь,
balance.
которая к этому моменту была сформирована, то судьба нашего государства, она висела на волоске.
It was during the World War, right?
Войны, да?
After the
Ну,
First
после
World War,
Первой
and
мировой
then.
войны, и затем
But then all the main
Тогда
events in the
начались
country
события
began.
в стране.
They
они
started,
начались, но
but it was
нужно было
necessary to save the
сохранить
country.
страну,
It was
нужно было
necessary to
сохранить
save the
народ.
people.
И
Again,
опять-таки,
I use
пользуясь
quite primitive
достаточно
categories
примитивными
to
категориями,
somehow
чтобы
convey this
как-то
idea.
донести эту идею.
And
А
then
далее
look,
смотри.
a modern
Современный
person
человек
does
не
not
понимает
understand that
того,
when
что
entering a mausoleum
заходя
or passing by it,
в
paying
мавзолей
attention to the
или
mausoleum,
проходя мимо
he
него,
leaves a piece
обращаясь
of
мимо
himself,
мавзолей,
a piece
он
of his energy
оставляет
there.
там частичку себя, частичку своей энергии.
When a
Когда
Westerner,
западник,
some kind of
задает мне
Americanos,
вопрос,
as it usually happens in
как
America,
обычно
is about the fact that we
бывает
walk around
в
Red
Америке,
Square
как
with
то, что мы
bears
выходим
and a
по
bottle
Красной
of
площади
vodka,
с медведем
and we
в
often
бутылке
see
водки,
these Americans.
а мы
They
часто
walk
видим
with our hats
молокососов,
ear
они
flaps,
суют с
like
нашими
such
шапками и
beans.
ушанками, знаешь, как бобики такие.
So
Вот
here
он,
he is,
войдя в
having
мавзолей,
entered the mausoleum,
он не
he
понимает,
does not understand that he will
он
come out of
выйдет
it
оттуда
already,
уже
as a
носителем
carrier of the
энергии
energy of communism.
коммунизма.
This is
Это же
reality.
реальность.
And
И
if it were
если
not
бы
for
не
this
этот
mechanism,
механизм,
we would not have
мы бы
won the
не
Second World
выиграли
War.
Вторую мировую войну.
We won
Мы
it with
ее
the last of our
выиграли из
strength.
последних
Well,
сил.
how does it
Ну, как
work?
это работает?
In
То есть
other
ты хочешь
words,
сказать,
you
что
want
вот
to
этот
say that this
Серафим, он
Terafim, he
объединяет
unites all our people,
весь
the
наш
whole
народ
country.
в
But for that,
страну, но
they
для
have to
этого
go
они
through the
должны
mausoleum,
пройти
right?
через мавзолей,
2.
правильно?
The first experience.
И его
Во-первых,
4.
подготовить и
By
сами
yourself.
получить.
десятков,
Remember,
если не сотен
tens, if
миллионов
not hundreds of
людей
millions of people have passed
прошло
through this
через это
place.
место. А это
And this is
Москва,
Moscow. This is the
это
heart,
сердце,
this is the
это
center.
центр.
And of course, one way
И,
or another,
естественно,
it all
так или
affects our
иначе, это
consciousness.
всё влияет на наше сознание. Так или
Anyway,
иначе.
if you
Если
dig
ты
inside
покопаешься
yourself,
внутри себя,
you will
ты
recognize
узнаешь,
that the
что
influence
влияние
is so one way or
оказывается
another.
так или иначе.
And in
И
this
таким
way,
образом
this colossal field is
создаётся
created.
вот это колоссальное поле.
The Germans in the 30s understand, I mean
Ещё
Annenerb, how it
в
works.
30-е годы поняли, я имею в виду Анненербе, как это устроено.
And
И
that
что
Russia can't
Россия
really
на
be
самом
defeated
деле
precisely because
не
this mechanism
победить
of transferring potential, it
именно
affects
потому,
people in
что
this way. The consciousness that if we
вот
are
этот
attacked, we
механизм
will give up all our
передачи
lives.
потенциала, он таким образом влияет на людей, на сознание, что если на нас напасть, то мы отдадим все свои жизни.
But it's not for me
Мы
to
не
tell
тебе
you,
рассказывать,
you're a
ты
Russian
гражданский
person.
человек.
Мгм.
И ты
And
знаешь,
you
что
know
мы
that we will do the impossible, but we will
сделаем
prove it.
невозможное, но мы докажем,
We will
мы
win.
победим. И
On Annerb,
Анненербе, вот
I
я
always say
всегда
that there
говорю,
was a
что
special
там
department there.
был особый отдел.
He was
Он
practically little
практически был
known. He was
малоизвестен,
not
о
widely
нем
talked about
ничего
anywhere.
широко не говорили.
And he
И он
collected
собирал
and understood the meaning of this
понимал
information, its value.
смысл этой информации, ее ценность.
And one
И
of the
одна из
tasks that they
задач,
set at the
которые
time
они в своё время
is an
поставили,
attempt to
это
destroy
попытка уничтожения
this energy source
разрушения
by any possible
данного
means.
энергетического источника любыми возможными
Therefore,
способами.
in the mausoleum, you mean?
Да, именно,
Yes,
именно
it is in the
мавзолей. Поэтому,
mausoleum. Therefore,
и
the main
основной
blow
удар
during the war was aimed at Moscow.
во время войны он был как бы нацелен на Москву,
It is
на разрушить
necessary
Москву,
to take Moscow
соответственно,
and destroy the
разрушить
mausoleum
мавзолей.
accordingly.
А,
But the
Но
Nazis took advantage of this idea.
нацисты воспользовались этой идеей.
And in their
И
seminars,
в своих
you mean
Семинар-
that they
ты
began
имеешь
to
в виду,
study
что
this
они стали
technology of
изучать вот
ours
нашу
or the
технологию,
technology of
технологию
Shambhala
Шамбала
in some
каким-то
way?
образом.
They were
Им
not
жертву
given
не
it.
дали,
The secrets were
секреты
not
не
revealed.
раскрыли.
They don't
Они
have
живут
mummies.
мумией.
They got
Они
to the bottom of
докопались.
it. They
Они
got to the
докопались
bottom
до
of the
сути этой
meaning of this
технологии.
technology. And at the
И
end of
в
October of the
конце
42nd year, a
октября
very famous event,
1942 года, очень известное событие,
to the Caucasus.
Кавказ,
They're under Elbrus.
под Эльбрус.
Do you remember there is a hidden airfield there, about which our people were not very well aware?
Не очень хорошо были осведомлены.
And the Germans, up to a certain point, had a chance to fly there calmly, right across the front line. And they built their energy source there.
Свой энергетический источник.
They built
Они
it
его там
there.
построили.
They built his
Построили
tract
его
Jilisu.
Жилысу.
And they wanted to do essentially the same thing that was implemented through the Mausoleum.
Mausoleum.
A plane arrived there, 2.5 Tibetan monks, and several people came out.
Монахов и несколько человек.
SS men.
Эсэсовцев, они
They
были
ascended to this place,
месту.
and then what we can call a sacrifice took place.
Произошло то, что мы можем назвать жертвоприношением.
When they were shot, let's say, because the documents officially say that 25 monks and several SS men really went up there, and then later they were found dead.
И несколько эсэсовцев, а потом позже их нашли мертвыми.
They were shot there.
Расстреляли.
The monks, you mean?
Да.
They were
Их
shot
там
there,
расстреляли.
like they
Типа,
did
они там
something
что-то
wrong
сделали
there,
не так,
and
наверное,
probably it was a
это было
punishment.
наказание.
There
Никакого
was no
наказания
punishment.
не было.
They did
Они
exactly
делали
what they
именно
came there
то,
for.
ради чего они туда пришли.
That is, at
То
the
есть в тот
moment when a
момент,
person
когда
left the
человек
body, he
покидал
went
тело,
directionally into
направленно
this
он
energy
уходил
source.
в этот
His
энергетический
consciousness was moving,
Его сознание
that is, his
перемещалось.
energy
Та его
component, the
энергетическая
matrix.
составляющая, матрица.
So there was some
Была
kind of
такая
device design
конструкция,
there.
устройство,
Да,
Yes,
да.
yes, that's
Именно-
exactly what
именно и
happened.
было.
Not
Мало
only
того,
is
что
the
там
energy
энергетическая
itself very
составляющая
strong there,
Так там
but there
есть
is also a
устройство,
device,
накопитель
a storage
своеобразный,
device,
концентратор.
a kind of hub.
А идея
And
была
the
такая.
idea was simple.
Выйти
To
в
enter the energy form
энергополе,
in the
а
energy
уже
field,
из
and
энергополя
already from the energy
оказывать
field
воздействие
to
на
influence the
сознание, на
consciousness.
сознание,
The
на
decision-making
принятие
of the
решений
Russian
руководства
leadership.
России.
The solution is
Решение
ingenious,
И
and they
они
began to
начали
implement
его
it.
реализовывать.
Another
Другое,
thing
что им
is that they
помешали.
were prevented,
И это
and this is a completely
совершенно
separate
отдельная
story.
история.
This device
Данное
was
устройство было
destroyed on the
разрушено
25th of
25
December,
декабря
1942nd year,
усилиями
by the
буквально
efforts of
там
literally
3 или
3
4
or 4 young
молодых парней.
guys. So our intelligence
Наша
somehow
разведка
found out.
всё-таки кто знал.
Yes,
Да,
they
они
found out.
узнали. Туда
Young
поднялись
people went up
молодые
there.
люди. Они знали,
They
куда
knew
они
where they
идут.
were
Они знали,
going.
что они идут
They
в
knew
войне
they were going
конец.
one way. But nevertheless,
Но тем не
from
менее,
this
из этой
group,
группы,
in
по-моему,
my
было
opinion,
всего 4
there were
человека.
only 4 people there.
Одного
One
удалось
managed to be
спасти,
saved.
и именно через
And it
него
was through him that the
информация,
information, it
она
reached
дошла
us.
до нас.
I talked
Я
to a man now
разговаривал с
living,
человеком, ныне
and his
живущим,
friends, his
и
relatives,
его
they
друзья, его
participated in this
родственники,
event.
вот они участвовали вот в этом событии.
How they
Каким
saved his
образом
life.
сохранили его жизнь?
Just
Просто
when they
когда
were climbing
поднимались
up,
наверх,
and their
и их
officers
НКВД
brought them to a
довели
certain
до
place.
определенного места,
And
а
then
дальше
they
они
had
должны
to
были
go
идти
up the
сами
glacier
уже
themselves
по
and
леднику
solve their
наверх, и там
problem
решать
there.
свой вопрос. Вот.
Then one
То
of the
один
relatives,
из
participants of this
родственников,
whole event,
участников
he told the
всего
youngest
этого события,
participant that when we go
он
up there,
сказал
there will be a glacier on the
молодому
right.
молодому участнику, что когда мы поднимемся туда, там справа будет ледник.
And I pushed
И я
you.
тебя столкну.
You
И
need
надо
to
прыгнуть
jump,
с нее.
or rather, he said.
Да, там торопят,
Yes,
ты, скорее
you probably
всего,
won't
не
survive there
выживешь,
either,
но
but you
удивишь
have a
сам.
chance. And when they got
Когда
up
они туда
there, he
поднялись,
naturally
он, естественно,
didn't
не
jump,
прыгнул,
he
тот
pushed
его
him.
столкнул.
Of course,
Тот,
he
конечно,
was broken,
переломался,
but
но
they
все-таки
found him
нашли, и
anyway.
информация
The
кое-как
information
дошла
somehow reached
об этом
about this
событии,
event,
о чем
which I will write
я
about
буду
in the
книги
book,
писать,
giving very
приводя
interesting
очень
data on
интересные
this
данные по
occasion.
этому поводу.
But
Но
let's get back
давай
to the point
вернемся
with
к
you.
самой сути.
After
После
everything
того,
happened
как
there,
всё
on
произошло
Jilisu,
там, на
this
Жилису,
territory, it was closed by officers.
эта территория, она была закрыта НКВДшниками.
Weren't the Germans
Немцы
guarding?
не охраняли?
And the Germans were guarding.
Немцы охраняли.
Or it was a hidden one of some
Нет,
kind.
немцы охраняли.
The Germans were
Но
guarding.
именно
But it was on the
25
25th of
декабря,
December,
когда
when the
немцы
Germans
немножко
relaxed a
расслабились,
little on the occasion of the corresponding
праздник
holiday,
соответствующий.
Мгм.
Christmas.
Рождество.
And the
Да,
guys
и
managed to
ребятам
blow up
удалось
this device and deal with all those who were
взорвать это
guarding.
устройство, ну и разобраться со всеми теми, кто охранял.
There
Там
was
был
a small
небольшой
contingent
контингент.
there. And already in January-February
Январь-февраль
1943,
43 начался
a powerful
мощный
rollback
откат.
of the Germans
Немцы
began in the
назад,
in the
в обратную
opposite
сторону.
direction. I understand how it works. It was this weapon that was the weapon that Hitler was talking about, that it was something that would turn the tide of the war.
Что это нечто такое, которое переломит ход войны.
And it
И
wasn't
это
a
не
nuclear
было
weapon,
этого.
it wasn't
Это
an
не
OI
было
missile.
этого.
It was
Это было
exactly
именно
that.
это.
Because the impact, the mental impact, the psychotronic impact on consciousness, the leadership of our country, on Stalin, and so on, could solve all the issues that take into account the factors of the fifth column, and so on. And why was it done by Nelbris in the mountains on the territory of our country? Because this is a very energetic place in Russia. And I even came across somewhere in the text that Elbrus, this mountain, was called the Slavic Kailas. In other words, there is a lot connected with this mountain. But the choice was made, on the one hand, right? But thank God that didn't happen. Of course, I repeat once again, I do not give details. We're talking about the mausoleum now. In other words, this technology of pumping a certain concentrator of psychic energy. And the mausoleum is exactly such a concentrator, formed the basis of the idea of this Shambhala project, the purpose of which is to preserve the territory, preserve Russia, preserve this Russian spirit in any way. Russian. I, for example, am not purely Russian, and that there are few purely Russian, but we are all united by one spirit. And precisely because, for this reason, there is an event of colossal importance behind all this. There is a struggle going on. Spears have been breaking for more than a dozen years, for more than 100 years, probably. Take Lenin's body out behind the mausoleum and bury it from there. Other sets do not give. And as at the very beginning of this whole story, certain forces imperceptibly, without signing any contracts, implemented this project only through mentality, through consciousness. In the same way, they are now trying to successfully preserve the situation in order to pump up energy resources at a new stage. This is the source that has an invisible, but very powerful influence on the consciousness of humanity living in this country. This is the great meaning of the mausoleum. And the fact that it was built according to science, and even the material was not chosen by chance. Pay attention. Black granite, make-up marble, red, brought from there. The ancient Maya temples were red. For what? Because the red color accumulates all the energy. Here's a purely technological answer. Red stone, why and how it was done. The project was successful. It works to this day. In other words, you want to say that this Lenin, in fact, ensures the unity of our state, unites people of different nationalities. And he did it. And everyone who passes, we just become great patriots. This is despite the fact that we have a fairly large position in our country, and there are now so-called relocants on agents. Apparently, it doesn't work on them, or they weren't there, I don't know. And I have a lot of questions right here. It smacks of your unloved word esotericism, although I understand that it has nothing to do with esotericism, because this is technology. The technology is ancient, which it is hidden, it is not publicized popular. Until now. Yes, this is the first time we are raising this issue with you, and I am trying to explain very simply, as clearly as possible, what the meaning of the mausoleum is. After all, I wanted to add something else. Modern man knows that there are pyramids of different configurations. There are stepped pyramids, there are smooth-walled pyramids, there are broken faces, whatever. Pyramids, which we call stepped ziggurats, they have one very important property. That if this pyramid is built in the right place, or it is pumped with the appropriate energy, then this structure begins to have a very powerful effect on the human psyche. Which is located nearby, which is generally nearby. And you want to say that all these ziggurats and pyramids of Maya, for example, were they built for the same purpose too? That is, there was a so-called teraphim somewhere inside the pyramids. No, there's another one. In Maya, we see the elements of construction, that is, how the pyramid is arranged. The mausoleum is very similar to the pyramids of Maya, because the step pyramid is built in the right place, and the altar is this from above. There were priests inside. Of course, this is a very powerful tool. The priests in this case were members of the government party. Remember, people were always welcomed with the mausoleum, Vaishnav and so on. This is already in later times. But when a normal stone decorate was already completed in 1930th year, events took place there, which are practically not mentioned anywhere, which are connected with the cult in a certain way. But I try to be very careful. Talk. Personalities. With a cult. An ancient cult. Because what we sometimes call putting such a negative context into the concept of a cult means daily practice to obtain some strictly defined result. For pumping, pumping, pumping. And going back to what you said about the Mayan pyramids, the main part of the Mayan pyramids were built very unsuccessfully. Knowledge was lost by this time. Therefore, in order for the pyramid to work, it was pumped with the energy of the fear of death. That's why a lot of blood was shed there. An offering. In this way, they tried to turn them on and find contact with God. Of course, the ziggurat built in the center of Moscow and the Mayan ziggurat cannot be compared. Our Shuzevsky ziggurat, it is built in general, not that perfect. And Shusav was aware. What do you think? First of all, this is a man who built sacred buildings, even before the revolution. He is quite a spiritual person, and the culture of building sacred structures was known to him. Therefore, he invested all his knowledge there and, not by chance, announced a competition of 117 projects, most of which were, oddly enough, pyramids or pyramid-like structures. Maybe the contest is all a fiction. So for this class, no, why? But another thing is that Shusav proposed a specific ziggurat without any decorations. If you say that this is a Shambhala project, surely they have already planned everything. And they brought more of the same to the desired design. Shambhala, I want to emphasize once again, Shambhala never comes to a person, shakes hands and says, "Listen, let's talk. There is an idea, maybe we will sign a contract. Let's do this, this and that, and you will be happy there." No. The work goes on at a subconscious level through dreams, through some visions, which are then erased. I see. That is, they act like this through the astral world. It turns out like this. Not astral, but for now. Let's call it that. For now. Let's call it that. Of course, because there are certain laws, certain prohibitions. Shambhala has fewer of these prohibitions than anyone else, because Shambhala is a product of the interaction of the consciousness of the earth and the consciousness of civilization, people living on earth. That is, in fact, it's us. Therefore, the influence of Shambhala on the consciousness of people has more permissions than the influence of any flying aliens. On some spoons. Everything is forbidden there for them. They are not allowed at all. And they try not to violate any agreements, any rules, otherwise it will be worse for them. Therefore, here and nevertheless, Shambhala always acts surreptitiously, as if in such a way that the result obtained was the achievement of the person who implemented this plan and so on. And what do you think? This is the purpose of this mausoleum. Has it already been achieved or not yet? Or are there any changes waiting for our state? Oh well, you see what's going on, right? I see, yes. Therefore, to say that the goal has been achieved. No, he'll have to work for a while yet. And despite the fact that the howl is constantly rising, it is necessary to take Kuzmich out of the mausoleum. It is necessary to do this, that, another. Reasonable people, and even church-going people, the same Nikita Mikhalkov. Guys, why? This is our past. Why? He cannot give an explanation for an understandable reason, but he feels purely humanly that there is something very important behind this. And this is important. And for some time, well, at least 2 years. That is, the turning point is the 25th year, from the autumn of the 25th to the autumn of the 26th. There will be a peak moment. But if this Third World War doesn't start before the autumn, until the late autumn of the 26th year, it won't start at all. Therefore, Putin too, as far as he feels with his heart, who loves Russia, that it is necessary, yes, unfortunately, losing people, but try to pass without any sharp gestures that will definitely lead to the beginning of landslide processes. After all, there are also crazy people on the other side in their own way. And do you know what I'm thinking about now? But after Stalin's death, he was also assigned to the Mausoleum. And even the inscription, 951, I think. And then they took him out. Do you think it was a mistake? Was it just an amateur performance? Or was it also some kind of ritual? No. Because here, in fact, they decided to intervene. But this, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But this was not a Shambhala project. That's what I think too. That's why it was removed in the Mausoleum. It was almost quickly removed from there. That is, you don't need an extra one. It is very difficult to predict the consequences. If Shambhala imagined what needed to be done and what sequence of events would lead to a result that could be imagined at least 50 years in advance, they did it as far as possible. But the situation that arose with Stalin, it was for them in a sense a surprise. Therefore, they localized this situation quickly enough, stopped it. Well, perhaps you have solved one of the most important mysteries, probably, of our country, of our state. Because they have been talking about the Mausoleum for quite a long time, and a lot. Especially everyone was confused by this strange protrusion, an angle that was asymmetrical with another. And it was directed just at the crowd when the crowd was walking, and there was a receiver that transmitted energy to the Terafim. There is a swap, and the Terafim was already in the astral world, performing some necessary actions of his own. He's the same. Lenin lived. Lenin is more alive than all the living. It turns out like this. He's really alive. This is your confirmation. Do you understand the meaning of this formula now? Did you realize? Yes, of course. Like a mantra. This was the plan from the very beginning. But only the work was going on, in at least 2 planes. And 1 plane. This is the impact of the influence of the pumping energy of the Shambhala project in other dimensions of the earth, where there is Lenin. Everything is there. So that everything is more efficient there, everything is better. It didn't work out perfectly for us. And in my physical world, yes, there are a lot of intersections, a lot of surprises. But nevertheless, the second plan is all that was connected with the Great Patriotic War, with these most difficult trials. It's very interesting. The Germans are famous researchers. Do you remember when our troops entered Berlin? They found a bunch of dead Tibetans in Hitler's bunker. I don't remember how many people. Their places. There must have been some kind of ritual going on, too. Surely the Germans also wanted to do something, right? Look, there it is again. The Germans also used some, partly technologies that modern man does not know about. That this is technology. The appearance of concentration camps and the use of concentration camps by the Nazis. They always turned on and warmed up the furnaces and began to massively knock out people before some important events. Because it's at the front, the highest altars, the real ones. They pumped up energy. That is, someone, not understanding what was happening, burned people. But it was necessary to burn so that people were in a state of increased stress and panic, radiating a certain energy. And the fact that these guys in green gloves, roughly speaking, they then redirected this energy. That's another story. But it was. That was exactly the point. And the gas chamber. All of this. The energy was redirected. Some more time will pass and people will first realize the reality of all this, then they will accept it, and then, realizing and accepting, they will try. Became so. Do not use these features. This is how they are arranged. They accept all the pain and tragedy that happened. There was destruction. Lots of people. Yes, millions of people. It's some kind of energy. It's a colossal energy. The fact that someone needs energy to this day, and it is going to this energy, obviously, starting with the bullfight. Why do you think? They kill animals. And the people are like at football. He pumps, the people are emotional. It's an outburst, a colossal outburst of energy that someone takes in. All stadiums, apparently, are arranged like this. The hub is such a football. The fans are screaming. Few people realize that even now this energy can be used. People just don't know how to do it. And thank God they don't know. Is someone else using it? Not people. No, it's being used, of course. Another thing is that there may be those who want to use this energy. I want to say right away that if a person does not have an understanding, I immediately warn, this is, let's call it a safety technique. That if a person does not understand how to transform this energy, not presumptuously, without all this, but tries to do it, this energy will, in fact, tear him apart. Well, let's just say, she'll just smash it. You can't. This is a very powerful type of energy. If you have already decided to take it, then you must understand how to transform it. Otherwise, you will go to hell. Well, Valor, I thank you. You also lifted such an interesting veil, helped to sort out the mausoleum. Now it is clear why it is there, why it should not be removed, because it unites our people, and why he was there. How it turned out, yes, this is really an ancient technology. There were a lot of such riddles. No one has ever asked such a question before. Mausoleum, mausoleum. There are already many mausoleums on the ground in different countries. We have burials in Siberia, hills in the form of pyramids, right? And why? Well, burial. Haha. No, not just a burial. For a reason. There are a lot of individual ones there, but we'll talk to you. And about the pyramids. I'm just waiting for the moment when you provoke me again. A lost conversation. All right. I thank you for today's conversation. And thank you. Thank you. We will move on. And the good and prosperity of our country. Our people. Our people. At this very difficult time. Thank you, friends, for being with us, for listening to the end. Please subscribe to our channel, like it, do not forget to press the bell so as not to miss important videos. And see you again.